This is WVBN from Japan. After arriving in Narvik, Japanese forces quickly determined that the best use of their assets was to coordinate a defensive grid with the other neutral powers in the city. Italy and the United States were asked to join a coordinated effort to secure the city, thanks to their non-belligerent status and size of their forces. While an international effort might have been hoped, rumors and fears of Allied operations dashed all but the most optimistic. The Italian cruiser Bari briefed the Japanese forces on their findings in the Arctic Circle, and who would seek an international expedition to defeat. All three powers began contingencies if any number of disasters were to strike Narvik or Norway itself. The captured weather device in Truk was allowed to be investigated by a team of Army specialists from Unit 439 and other security forces. The control room was breached after some effort, but the inner workings of the facility were a mystery to all. A control console was eventually discovered in the center of the room, and was briefly activated while scientists and engineers investigated. An exceedingly brief snowstorm hit the island, but it left as quickly as it had arrived, when the machine lost power. Further investigation revealed the semi-organic connected nature of the device, but offered little insight as to the purpose of the various components. A receptacle was eventually discovered that seemed to fit a large battery, and a spare submarine battery was hooked up to the machine. Though it briefly flickered to life, the battery was drained almost instantly. Further investigation would be required to understand the workings of the device better, but their power supplies at least were not endless. A naval escort brought an army supply convoy from the Japanese mainland over to Korea this week. The only other vessels encountered were a stray Soviet fishing boat quickly sent away, and a lone Morgana submarine stalking the convoy, quickly destroyed by escort forces. The convoy arrived at Incheon, and the Navy officers were met by two Mongolian officers. Their cargo, unbeknownst to the IJN officers, was 1,000 black stallions. The Mongolian officers inspected them, and, satisfied, brought them to be taken further inland. When a Navy officer asked an Imperial Army officer why they had been escorting horses, the Army officer replied that it was how the Mongolians conducted wars. Also brought over was more conventional equipment such as trucks, carbines, and other military equipment. It was hoped that these supplies would secure the loyalty of the Mongolian forces in their ranks, and give them equipment to wage war against communist forces in Inner Mongolia. Whether or not they succeeded, it would prove a sizable distraction while the army did its work. It was observed by nearby Tokaitai officers that, while not exactly camaraderie, the Army and Navy officers were getting along fairly well as they gossiped and discussed the ongoings of Japan. This week's ENAR discussions proved far less contentious than previous, as the subject was escort vessels. Based on past experiences and the testimony of the kami of Kiji and Tone, it was agreed that Japan's anti-submarine warfare capabilities were severely lacking. Previously planned Kaibokan vessels, effectively tiny destroyers overloaded with various capabilities, would be cancelled in favor of an immediate run of new Otori-class vessels, designed according to Kiji's own specifications. These Otori Kai would see an improved anti-submarine and anti-air suite, as well as new quad launchers for the venerable Type 93 torpedoes. Kiji herself was able to support a quad launcher in her old hull, but the remaining Otori classes would only be able to fit triple launchers. These would be a stopgap for the proposed Type D destroyers, which aim to modernize Japan's escort capabilities on a universal hull, able to perform all required duties comfortably. These destroyers are, however, only in the pre-planning phase, and they would need substantial combat experience to complete. Until then, 8 Otori Kai would be laid down in various shipyards across Japan, and are estimated to be finished by the end of the year. Japanese submarine warfare had a disastrous week as 2 submarines, RO-30 and I-53, failed to make their regular check-ins with command. They are believed lost with all hands. Another submarine, I-58, returned to base in rough shape after being ambushed by a Morgana patrol. The submarine survived and the Morgana were driven away by a nearby surface squadron, but the submarine will be out of commission for 4 months. A fourth submarine, I-68, suffered even worse damage. The submarine was assigned to patrol east of Formosa, but her captain opted to extend his regular patrol range, and discovered a sin returning to Guam. He pursued and sank the carrier with a salvo of well-aimed torpedoes. Unfortunately, the Morgana had nearby allies who were eager to sink the vessel in return. Shells and depth charges rained down on the submarine, and all was nearly lost until a series of events returned the vessel to safety. I-68 herself awakened to save the captain, carrying him to a safe part of the vessel. She later reported that the Kami called Ama returned the submarine from what would have been its watery grave to home port. She would not speak more as she was in great pain. The surviving crew were evacuated, and medical, engineering, and spiritual personnel were brought in to assist the survivors in recovering from their ordeal. The submarine was expected to be out of commission for 17 months, though future programs may speed up these repairs. Repairs on Tone began to look up as engineers finished patching the last of the major holes in her hull, and the Kami herself finally began to grasp the ability to teleport herself, moving a few miles upstream and saving the workers from a major land-moving operation. Though several challenges still lay ahead, the cruiser was in much better shape than first began. A number of workers searching for Mikasa's old guns located what appeared to be them, or guns from one of her sisters, in a warehouse containing old weaponry and other naval supplies. On-site personnel analyzed the weaponry and quickly concluded that they were in too poor a shape and too obsolete, and ordered them melted for scrap before anyone could stop them. With this lead a dead end, the Admiralty added a question of how to arm Mikasa to be discussed after the Enar plans, ideally with input from Mikasa herself, should she finally be awakened. The political situation in China saw the formation and recognition of the reorganized National Government of the Republic of China, under head of state Wang Jingwei in Nanjing. Jingwei made a pilgrimage to the tomb of Sun Yat-sen, the first president of the Republic of China, to establish his legitimacy as the successor to his ideals. Upon his return, he was greeted by Japanese diplomats and army officers, who welcomed him as they recognized his claim and finalized the transfer of military assets to the new Chinese Navy. Jingwei's first action was to address the people of China concerning the ongoing war. He revealed that Chinese and Japanese troops had been fighting side by side against the communist forces in the north, who had been collaborating with Morganas. He promised that the new Chinese naval assets would be a great boon to warding them off the coasts, and hinted that a bell had emerged among them. He finished his speech by imploring Chiang Kai-shek to join him in purging China of the threat of Morganas and communism both. The Kuomintang did not offer comment. This has been WVBN from Japan.